The Indiana Pacers explain away how the Bucks landed Myles Turner. We give our reaction whether or not it checks out, and more of talking ourselves into Bradley Beal. That comes your way next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day, each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. A lot of little pieces of news to kind of pull together here on today's show, Camille, and I guess we should start no better place than everything is now official that it was the moratorium lifted. You can start to announce these signings, and the Bucks have done that. The Bucks and many other teams, every team but the Warriors, actually, who I believe are still the only team that has not made a move in free agency. But they've started to announce these moves and trades as well. The Pat Connaughton got his thank you post. Damian Lillard gets his thank you post. Not going to fall for the trap and read the comments on the day one, Camille. But the Indiana Pacers did the same thing, not just announcing the signings, but Kevin Pritchard, their general manager or president of basketball ops, was addressing media and talked about losing Myles Turner in free agency to the Bucks. He was the longest tenured player on the team. As Pritchard said, they were in communication with Myles Turner, and then it just abruptly ended on July 1st when Shams Charania reported on Twitter that Myles Turner agreed to a 4-year deal with the Bucks, ending his tenure with the Indiana Pacers. So according to Kevin Pritchard and the Indiana Pacers, they found out through Twitter, X, that Myles Turner was leaving. We're not obviously as plugged in or connected to the Pacers as our guy Tony East is, but you buy this?
I can buy that they were caught off guard by which team it was, but I would think that once you hear like the radio sound, if that's the way that it went, something's up at that point, because someone that you've had a relationship with for years, they just don't go radio silent for no reason. And there's been conflicting reports out there about how much money the Pacers were willing to offer Myles Turner, and if the difference between what the Bucks were offering and what the Pacers were offering was that great. And I even saw Pritchard mention, we would have been open for a sign and trade, but we found out about this move when everybody else found out about this move. So if that is the way that it went, with the Pacers not being aware, that's cold-blooded. That's cold-blooded from Myles Turner. But everybody always talks about how this is a business. This is a business. This is a business. And Myles Turner is someone whose name has been in trade rumors throughout a great deal of his tenure with the Indiana Pacers as well.
Yeah, I mean, it cold-blooded, sure, if that's what happened. But I guess the way that I would phrase it is the Pacers found out. You messed around all of last year. And as you mentioned, he was always in trade discussions. That's not necessarily coming from the team. A lot of that is, we've certainly experienced, can be fans. But, I mean, you could have avoided this. You could have entered an agreement with him before this. By all accounts, as you mentioned, a lot of different figures tossed around on what the Pacers actually offered him. But I was talking about this with Tony, too, in that what the reported offer was obviously very low, and Myles Turner ended up getting more than that. If it was something where the offer was even lower, and there was initially reports that they were not willing to go past 3 years for Myles Turner, that it was basically like a 3-year, $60 million offer that was thrown out there for him. If it's low enough like that, and you're Myles Turner, and you're saying, guys, you do realize I'm the number one free agent out there. I'm not 30 years old yet. I've been here for 10 years. Like, I can get more, even if teams don't have, or there's not a lot of teams with cap space. I can get more money out there. And I'm sure part of this for the Indiana Pacers, if this is how in fact it unfolded, was, yeah, I mean, I don't know where you're getting this from. So go shop the contract offer that we give you. If you get something better, bring it back to us and we'll match. That's what Kevin Pritchard kind of hinted at. But, the interesting part, him stating the obvious, that they were surprised that Milwaukee was in there. They didn't see them finding the avenues to create that cap space to sign him, which they did by ultimately stretching Damian Lillard. You mentioned it too. We would have been open to a sign and trade because it's sort of mutually beneficial, but we didn't get to that point. I saw Shams tweet it, and that's how I knew Myles was taken away. That's the interesting part too. And a few others brought this up, whether or not this would morph into a sign and trade, where the Pacers would create a trade exception, and you could flip the Bucks a second round pick or something like that to create this. So, or vice versa, the Bucks could toss something in and get some more back too, and the Pacers get that trade exception. But that's not what we're getting here, which makes it even more cold for Myles Turner and from Jon Horst and company. But the real question here is how much of this, and why I say, and again, we don't have any type of relationship or know or follow Kevin Pritchard closely enough to know, but why I would question how much of this is putting on the spin and getting the message out there that you need to get out there, because all the narrative surrounding this has been the cheapness of the Indiana Pacers. And we've certainly dealt with those accusations in Milwaukee, not in the last 7 or 8 years, but prior to that. Actually, I take that back. After the Bucks won the title, we heard that when PJ Tucker left. But as we've seen, they had no problem spending. And as Kevin Pritchard put it, that was not an issue. There was the report before Game 7, too, from Shams. The Pacers were willing to go upwards of $30 million for him and go deep into the luxury tax. It's something they've never done, or 20 plus years under Herb Simon and Stephen Rails. And, as it was put, the ownership group, the Simon family, were fully prepared to go deep in the tax. We really wanted to do that. We were negotiating in good faith. But what happens in this league sometimes is you're negotiating, but because a guy is an unrestricted free agent, he has the right to say, that's the offer I want. I'm going to take it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to for me. And one thing that you said that stood out to me from listening to Pritchard talk was Myles was taken away. Like the wording of taken away really stood out to me, of like, not like we lost this player or negotiations thing, like he was taken from us, which when I heard initially throughout the finals run that Myles Turner could command $30 million and the Pacers were willing to pay that, I remember saying like, ooh, that's kind of steep. 30 M's a year is kind of steep, but hey, this Pacers group has shown that they can play well together. I can see why you want to keep it together. Tyrese Halliburton's injury, I feel like, changed so much of the equation for this Pacers team, of just how they felt about their books. Not to mention, like, it wouldn't be fair to not mention the fact that Myles Turner also did not have a great NBA finals. So like that all plays into it. So when you get down to negotiations here and you're hearing like, hey, it did not shake out the way that the Pacers hoped that it would, because of, as we heard from other reports, the lower offer, him being able to get something better from Milwaukee, which was completely unexpected. So I also think your point about the Pacers possibly going and be like, hey, if you can beat this offer that we're giving you, go out there and do it. And again, who would have thought the Bucks would really stretch and waive Damian Lillard and keep 22.5 mil on their books for the next 5 years? But it's a move the Bucks made to lock down a center that they think can be a great front court mate to Giannis for the future. And given proof of concept with the Brook Lopez, you can see the mold of the player and why you do it. So ultimately for Indiana, hey, their loss worked out for the Bucks gain. And I love a move that can also make a competitor worse while it makes you better. So it's a win-win in the Bucks book for me.
Yeah, it makes the rivalry all the more interesting this upcoming season. Although Kevin Pritchard basically confirmed we will not see Tyrese Halliburton, even if your final game against the Pacers is the final game of the regular season. We're not going to see Tyrese Halliburton in that series between the Bucks, because Kevin Pritchard basically said, yeah, he's not going to play this, which not a surprise to go down in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And a player of his age, you do want to be extra cautious. And to your point, you do have to wonder how much that just triggered everything. And really, Camille, the more interesting discussion is Achilles tendons in general and the ripple effect that 3 Achilles have now had on the NBA in this offseason, one that we are already expecting to be very, very busy, and we've certainly got those fireworks so far. So we'll explore that further, as well as the Bucks making their moves official and some interesting numbers attached to some of those moves that the Bucks have made. We'll get into that conversation coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're a baseball person taking in the action under the lights, maybe you're out there taking in golf on the green, or the old-fashioned football is your sport, taking on some high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. If you're already following the action, why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. It's easy to use, the payouts are fast, and it makes even regular season games feel like they're must-watch events. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're a part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the Bucks make their moves official as well. Damian Lillard officially waived and stretched. Vasa Micic agreed to give back, $6 million, basically? Yeah. So it's a $2.1 or $2.2 million cap hit that the Bucks are taking to waive him. It's not a waive and stretch. It's just a standard waive. And the Bobby Portis signing becomes official. It's actually not a huge margin, but the contract figures are actually a little lower than that reported number. Not surprising. Agents do it. We all did it in school as well. Like, let's just round these numbers up. So Bobby Portis's base year pay this year, it's going to be a little lower than what was initially reported. It's going to be $13.4 million. That's key because between that and the Micic buyout, that freed up enough space for the Bucks to not only sign Myles Turner, and his figures $24.8 million this year, but it allowed them to sign Myles Turner while retaining those cap holds on Ryan Rollins and Gary Trent Jr. So what that in turn does is it preserves a part of your why am I blanking on the exception that the Bucks, the room exception? Thank you. Not a whole lot. It's not the figure that the Clippers have, but still, you got a part of the room exception available that you can use to either bring in a player via trade or sign somebody that's out there on the market. Maybe a 2-guard that we talked about yesterday that we'll get into that discussion a little bit later on the show as well. But the Bucks make all of these moves official as well. And, is it a roster that you look at and you say, this is one of the 3 best rosters in the conference? No. Can it get there? I'm not going to say no. When we talk about where Indiana is at, they lost Myles Turner. I think Jay Huff is a very good signing. Maybe you got 2/3 of Myles Turner for a 1/5 of the price there, but you lose Myles Turner. You're not going to have Tyrese Halliburton this year. You do have other guys, but just as we talked about, with AJ Green, when the notion would come up, well, if Gary Trent Jr. leaves, you can just start AJ Green, sure. But then who's replacing AJ Green as that guy off the bench? That's what the Pacers are facing right now this year of, okay, who's going to be the new Nembhard next to Nembhard? And what does this mean for Benedict Mathurin? Who's going to be that guy off the bench for us? So that's the domino effect from all of these moves. But, it's a roster that I think if we squint enough, you got enough young pieces. And from day one, we had said, look, the goal for this team should be Giannis is the oldest player on the team. Now, they're technically not there, Camille, as we noted before. Gary Harris, just slightly older than Giannis. Taurean Prince is about a year older than Giannis as well. But those are 2 guys that they're not going to be your play 8 trust 7 in the playoffs. So you've done a good job of maintaining that flexibility to bring in just young guys. You got younger at center. You kept Bobby Portis, who's actually younger than Giannis. You kept the young guards in the backcourt, all 3 of them. And I think we're all kind of bracing for probably going to keep 2 of these 3 guys, but you kept all of them. And I'm not ruling out, as we just said, with the room exception, you can bring in a player in a trade, albeit not a huge one, but you have some flexibility. And we have continued to see some sourced reporting that says, hey, the Bucks are not done yet. That this has been an offseason where Jon Horst knew this critical for us, that we have the ever looming question around Giannis that's never going to go away. We got to take a step forward here to start to put some things around him, to at least give him a reason to say, I can see it. I'm not looking for a reason to leave. And I mean, to say they've done that, I think is an understatement. Whether or not you can say, hey, they're one of the 3 best teams in the conference, it could have been really bleak. And now I think you've put yourself in a position to say, you know what? If we play like we did the last 8 games of the season, we play this heliocentric system around Giannis. We like the young guys that we have. We think they're all Ryan Rollins, Gary Trent, especially AJ Green and Ryan Rollins. We think those guys are going to take a step forward, maybe even Tyler Smith. We feel pretty strongly that we're going to be a top 4 team in the conference. You can at least make that case with some of these moves that they did. And, you know, as great as Damian Lillard was, I do think, I don't understand some of the media types out there that are saying, look, you can criticize having $22.5 million for 5 years. That's dead cap money. I get that. But to say, I just don't see how the Bucks made themselves better this year. I mean, better to the point where you're a legitimate championship contender. I don't think we can say that yet, but I also don't think you can say they're not better. You know, Myles Turner, as much as we love, you and I especially, Brook Lopez, Myles Turner is an upgrade on Brook Lopez. You bring back all those young guys that we just mentioned who are starting to really show this is the way that we have to play. And these are your most important guys. Who knows? Maybe there's one more move left. But to me, most importantly, to finish that point on Dame is I just feel like it's going to get taken the wrong way, but it's almost an addition by subtraction thing in this sense, not Dame the person or any of that, but it's an anchor. You know, you're kind of in purgatory when you have a long-term injury like that, where you're just kind of waiting to see when is he going to come back? What version of him is he going to be when he comes back? And then guys like Ryan Rollins and Kevin Porter Jr. just kind of waiting for, what does that mean for me when Damian Lillard comes back? Like that uncertainty, you can't put a number on it of how it impacts you, but it does. And you eliminated that.
Yeah, you eliminated that. And I think when looking at how national media is looking at the Bucks roster, I do wonder how many of them are looking at it under the eyes of the way that they're going to run their offense is not going to be through Kevin Porter Jr. at point guard or through Ryan Rollins at point guard. And this offense is going to be what we saw last year for most of the year with Damian Lillard, a lot of pick and rolls and so on and so forth, dribble hand. Like that's not the vision of the Bucks going forward, at least how I understand it, how we've been talking about how they're going to pivot going into this new era of Bucks basketball with Giannis still at the helm, which is a more Giannis-centric offense where he is the one initiating the offense. And then what do you need around him? Like we had a conversation on Technical File last week about the Denver Nuggets and just the lack of point guards on the roster because they have a lot of combo guards outside of Jamal Murray and shooting guards. And it was kind of a conversation around like, well, when you have Nikola Jokic, your need for traditional point guard isn't as high. You can really get by with the combo guards because you're running a lot of your offense through Jokic. Of course, they have Jamal Murray, which is a firecracker of a number 2 option over there, along with Aaron Gordon. So the team makeup isn't 1-for-1. But what the Bucks are looking to do, having younger guys that can play faster, play defense, knock down open shots, move the ball. That's the piece of it that I think some national media are missing about how the Bucks are going to play, and which is part of why I look at this roster and think like, there's a shot for them to finish top 4. I'm really at this point still like a top 6 team in the East. I can see them being that. But of course, things could go completely wrong and they can end up being a play-in team. But when you have Giannis on the squad, like I think that your floor is still like top 6 in the conference based on everything else that's going on. And to your point about flexibility with the roster and how there are still moves to be made. I saw we had a tweet actually come in with someone just asking like, hey, I'm looking at the updated, Bobby Marks cap sheet and I don't see the non-taxpayer MLE. I'm not seeing the BAE no more. Where are all these other things that we heard the Bucks had to help solidify the roster, and why don't we have it anymore? And with the moves that the Bucks made, with the waiving of Dame and clearing all that cap space, like they've been operating as a cap team, so they no longer have access to those particular tools. But as you mentioned, they do still have part of their room exception, so they can use that to bring someone else in. And we also saw tonight that the Bucks pushed back the guarantee date on the contract of Andre Jackson Jr. So they also have the flexibility in that of like, hey, if we do want to get off this roster spot of Jackson and add someone else, there's that flexibility too, because as it currently stands, they have room for two more players heading into the season. So I'll be really curious to see how Jon Horst fills that up, and if this Andre Jackson Jr. move is a precursor to something else that might be on the way.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Bobby Marks too, who jumped into that tweet thread to break it down and explain it as well. And I think Frank noted it too, but we mentioned what the Bucks have in the room exception left. I believe it's right around the same, or maybe exactly the same as what the veteran minimum for Bradley Beal would be anyway. So that's what you have to play with here if you're the Bucks. We did mention and didn't get to it yet, the Achilles and the impact that has had. You mentioned the standings that I want to take a look at, or end of season, way too early. I want to take a look at there, and then some final thoughts on what we touched on yesterday, the potential addition of Bradley Beal. Are we starting to talk ourselves into it? Because I think, Camille, lurking through our comments, I think it was a lot more against it than in favor of it. So we'll start to get into that coming up next. It is fascinating to look back at this playoffs and just think about Achilles and the impact that had. I mean, look, you can act like you're blindsided at or like stunned at what the Celtics are doing, but we've had these conversations before that you knew either this summer or next summer it was going to have to be blown up for the second apron purposes, and Jason Tatum's injury expedited that. But that made the Celtics just say, not only do we have to get under the second apron, there's some reports that Boston is really trying to get out of the tax. And I wonder what that means if they're done. Obviously, if they're getting under the tax, they're not done. But what that would mean for guys like Sam Hauser, and do you really start to sell everything that you can find here? Al Horford hasn't picked a team yet, but it's an assumption Al Horford is leaving Boston. So they're going to be an interesting team where I would think you would have to say, it's not going to be like a wide gap, but the Bucks, I would have to pick them to finish in front of the Celtics to take Jason Tatum off that. Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Al Horford. Tyrese Halliburton won. And again, 6 minutes into that game? I mean, just think about this. As great as it was for Indiana to get that win in Game 6 for the home fans and force a Game 7. And I'm never going to complain with getting a Game 7. But What if you just lost that game? And Tyrese Halliburton, Game 6, that is. You just lose. Thunder win and celebrate in your home court, not great. But Tyrese Halliburton doesn't tear his Achilles, has a whole summer to rehab. The talk of Myles Turner, we're willing to go close to $30 million and go deep in the tax, probably happens. Yeah. And then the Indiana Pacers are going to be looked at as the Cavs and the Pacers. One of these two teams probably going to have the best record in the East next year. The injury happens, all bets are off with Indiana. And then the Damian Lillard injury, which we kind of tiptoed around this before even the wave and stretch, but it was all but confirmed in some stories and reporting by our friend Eric Name and Jim Ozarski. this was going to be the end of the Giannis and Dame experiment. You really get that strong sense that if Damian Lillard didn't tear his Achilles, there probably would have been a trade this summer where it's the Bucks taking back a contract, maybe being attached to something that's even longer term, but a younger player and not creating quite as much flexibility. And then in that sense, it's much closer to just running the same thing back. So these 3 Achilles injuries have dramatically changed things for everyone, those 3 teams, but the ripple effect of other teams, like the Atlanta Hawks to say, this is our opportunity. Let's get in there. The
Orlando.
Pistons, Orlando, the Pistons trying to make some moves. Orlando is, to your point, bringing in Desmond Bane. That I can't think of anything like this. We have 3 injuries that significant, all in the same conference, and the impact that on paper they figure to have months later.
All in one playoff run at that. Like,
round by round.
yeah, another one every single round. Like, it's crazy to think about. And to that, again, it goes back to earlier arguments when the Bucks season was freshly over and there was conversation around like Bucks should just trade Giannis. And it's like, if you have a chance in this conference, like, take the fact that you have a chance and see what you can do with it, because you never know what's going to happen. Like, it's an open conference. Like, of course, you mentioned a lot of the teams that you're going to see favored, the Knicks to the Cavaliers for sure, but there's a world where for the Bucks this works, and in part because of just unfortunate injury luck that just kind of hit the lead, the Dame injury. And to your point about if he did not get hurt, that the Damian Lillard experience in Milwaukee might have been over anyways based on other reporting. It again reminds me of just how short all of these windows are. Like, you see what just happened in Miami today with them trading for Norm Powell, sending out Slow-Mo, sending out Kevin Love. And now you're in a situation where it's like, oh, okay, they got another, shot creator over there next to Tyler Hero, but it's an expiring contract as well, where you're like, okay, there's
the guy the
still
Clippers traded because he wanted to get paid.
exactly. And they were like, well, we don't know about all that, so we just gonna move you real quick. John Collins getting moved on an expiring deal. Like, windows are so much shorter. And even when you look at Orlando and the fact that they just signed Apollo to this extension that should kick in, I believe, next season now, the window, like, when you're paying that many guys that much, your window, you're looking at 2, maybe 3 years there to see what shakes out. And if you don't see anything working, you see those trades happening. And I think we are moving in the direction of an NBA where you're seeing more trades rather than you're seeing big name free agents hit the market and then go somewhere. Like, it's a lot of trades going on now. And that trade for the Heat, I mean, we've seen some people talking about it, effectively takes them out of the Bradley Beal sweepstakes, if you want to call it that, post buyout. But the Bucks are still being listed as a team that Bradley Beal will consider once he's bought out, in addition to 3 other LA teams. So you're seeing like Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, and then the Bucks, because of course Milwaukee fits. But the allure of playing time and a big role can definitely sway opinions.
And the reporting on that was really a big part of why the Heat were willing to make that trade. Was they either got the impression they weren't going to be a finalist or strong consideration for Bradley Beal, or they just didn't want to wait around for it and like, let's just get this guard now. That's going to help us out. The Paolo Banchero move, to your point about windows, it makes the Magic a second apron team next season. That they're going to blow past that figure. By my count, they're at about $227 million for 10 players in salary cap. And that second apron level next season is $222 million. So that really kicks up the clock there too. And then you're looking at Franz Wagner making over 40 million, Desmond Bane just under 40 million, Paolo Banchero just under 50 million, Jalen Suggs at 32 million. Like, we're going to hear the conversations next summer, or potentially, if things aren't working great or there's a clunky fit at the deadline, of who gets moved from Orlando to start to shed some of the money there. And, the other thing to kind of round out the Giannis point that you made, we talked about earlier too. That's the other thing that I think you just have to accept, that anybody outside of Milwaukee doesn't understand. but it's not as simple as just, the notion of, boy, if this is what you're doing to mortgage your future, like, isn't it easier to just trade Giannis? And I mean, to me, no, it's not. Like, it's one thing if you're talking about, um, and I let's not take this the wrong way, Jaylen Brown, right? Like,
Yeah.
trading Jaylen Brown, recoup a package there. Like, yeah, very good young player. Not the greatest player in Boston Celtics franchise history. Not a guy that has that type of connection to the community of Boston. It's not to say he doesn't have one, but not a guy that has something like that. And it's things like that. I mean, ask Nick in Locked On Mavericks.
Yeah.
Even if you're getting back a good young player, you still really want to trade Luka Doncic and how that goes. So I think that's what gets lost in all of this is, look, this guy saved basketball in Milwaukee. We are irrelevant. We're not even around maybe anymore if he's not here, and he wants to be here. He is the greatest player in the history of our franchise and one of the greatest players in the history of this league. So if he wants to be here, we want him here. We're not exploring moves.
And he's good enough to the point where if he is on your team, like we mentioned, like you have a shot. And the idea of trading in a guaranteed shot with Giannis, an entity that you know, a quality that you know of what type of player you're getting for a chance, it's not always guaranteed. Like I saw an analogy, I believe it was from Jim Orzowski of Journal Sentinel, saying it's like having a diamond in your hand and you hand it to your neighbor of like, here, you can have this diamond. Let me dig up your backyard for the next 2 years to try to find a new diamond. And you're digging, and while you're digging, trying to find a diamond, you're watching your neighbor just hold your old one up. Like,
I mean, Camille, let's put in ways that a lot of our listeners and Wisconsinites would understand. You just pulled $500 on pull tabs, and do you want to take that and say, I'm going to turn this into $500 worth of tickets and see if I can win even more? Like, no, I don't think I'm going to pull 500 again. So I'm keeping this.
Yeah, you keep it and you continue trying to work with it, make something shake from it, flip that 500 if you have to, but like you keep it going forward. So I think that is an aspect that is generally missed in Milwaukee when talking about Giannis. And that's why, again, like we mentioned 2 more roster spots, possibly 3 with what happens with Jackson. But like, again, the direction for the team, like a Bradley Beal does make sense. But if they don't go in that direction, like it's going to be a by committee approach. And I would hope that the Bucks continue to kind of just add some more youth to see, like, can we hit on this guy here? Can we hit on this guy here? Can we find the next Pat Connaughton in the sense of a younger player that's been in the league already, might need a little bit more development, and he can develop here in Milwaukee and become a quality role player, if nothing else, for the team.
You mentioned the Andre Jackson Jr. update there. He's pushed back his guarantee date on the contract for this upcoming season. That date was originally supposed to be July 7th. So today, as we record this, so now in exchange for pushing it back, a portion of his salary is going to be guaranteed. It gives the Bucks a little more flexibility to, as it was noted, help maintain and fill out the roster. So take that as you will if you read between the lines. I think we'll spend some more time on that on tomorrow's show or an upcoming show this week, especially as we start to get more clarity on what that flexibility is. I think the important thing to wrap with here and see your reactions in the comments. We already saw some of them yesterday, but just look, $3.6 million for Bradley Beal. Take it or leave it. Are you interested in that? Because it's not a massive contract we're talking about. It's the same spot whoever signs Damian Lillard is probably going to be in. Would you take Bradley Beal as your number 2 scoring option for basically the veteran minimum for a player of his service time? I think that's much more palatable for that figure. So leave your thoughts there, and we'll see what you have to say when we get to tomorrow's show. But we'll see what other developments come the way of Andre Jackson Jr. and any other moves the Bucks are working on here. Look, we still got to see Bradley Beal get bought out. So we'll see if that officially happens and any other reporting the teams that he's going to be interested in. And before you know it, we'll have Summer League. Just 2 days away now. First game to preview for the Bucks. That'll do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.